If your container garden looks tired in July, do not assume you failed. Do not assume you have no green thumb, and do not assume that summer has already won. Sometimes the problem is not your watering, your soil, or your sunlight. Sometimes the problem is that you are asking cool season vegetables to perform in weather they were never built for. A pot of lettuce that was sweet in spring can turn bitter and bolt when the days get long and hot. Spinach that looked perfect a few weeks ago can suddenly stretch, yellow, or disappear. Cilantro can race to flower almost before you get a good harvest. But right beside those struggling plants, another pot can be full of life. Okra can be standing tall. Basil can be branching out. Peppers can be setting color. Malabar spinach can be climbing like it finally found the season it was waiting for. That is the secret of a July container garden. The heat is not always the enemy. The wrong plant in the wrong season is the real problem. When you choose vegetables that enjoy warm soil, strong light, and steady harvesting, a small patio, balcony, deck, or backyard corner can still grow a surprising amount of food. And this is especially important in July because many gardeners are not starting with perfect conditions. Maybe your spring crops are tired. Maybe your first tomato plant grew too big for its pot. Maybe your balcony gets blazing afternoon sun. Or your deck turns hot enough that you can feel the heat coming up through your shoes. That does not mean you have to wait until fall. It means every pot has to earn its place, and every plant should be chosen for the season you are actually in. Before we go through the 15 vegetables, there is one thing to understand. Growing in pots during July is different from growing in the ground. A container heats up faster, it dries out faster. If it sits on concrete, brick, or a dark deck, the roots can feel the heat even more. A plant may love summer weather, but it still needs enough room for roots. A potting mix that holds moisture without staying swampy, and watering that reaches the lower part of the pot, not just the top inch. So these vegetables are not magic. They are simply better matched to July heat than many cool season crops. Give them the right pot, enough water, and a little attention, and they can turn the hottest part of the season into a productive stretch instead of a garden shutdown. Think of the 15 vegetables in this video as a toolbox, not a rule that every gardener must follow exactly. If your space gets full sun most of the day, you may lean toward okra, peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, cucumbers, and beans. If your space is bright but brutally hot in the afternoon, you may choose herbs, chard, mint, and leafy vines with a little afternoon relief. If you only have railing space, vertical crops become your best friends. If you only have a few small pots, herbs and green onions may give you more satisfaction than forcing a large tomato into a container that cannot support it. The point is not to collect every plant. The point is to stop wasting July on vegetables that are telling you they are unhappy. A good gardener listens. When lettuce bolts, it is speaking. When spinach disappears, it is speaking. When a cucumber wilts every day in a tiny pot, it is speaking too. Your job is not to feel guilty. Your job is to adjust. July is a very honest month in the garden. It shows you quickly which plants belong and which ones are only surviving because you keep rescuing them. One more thing before the list begins. Do not judge a July garden only by how it looks at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Many healthy plants droop a little during peak heat, especially in containers. The better question is whether they recover by evening, whether the soil has moisture down where the roots are, and whether new growth is still appearing. A tired plant that never recovers is a warning sign. A heat-loving plant that relaxes in the afternoon and stands back up later may simply be managing a hot day. Let's start with okra, because if there is one vegetable that looks like it was made for a hot summer container, it is okra. Okra does not sulk in warm weather the way many leafy greens do. It likes sun, it likes warmth. It grows upright, which makes it useful when your space is limited, and even one healthy plant in a deep container can make a small garden feel alive again. The key with okra in a pot is depth. It is not the best choice for a tiny decorative container that dries out by lunchtime. Give it a deeper pot or grow bag, use a good quality potting mix, and let the plant build a strong root system. Okra can handle heat, but it does not mean the roots should be baked dry every afternoon. A layer of mulch on top of the pot can help keep the soil more even, and watering deeply in the morning is usually better than giving it a shallow splash later in the day. Okra also gives you a good visual reward. The leaves are bold, the flowers are beautiful, and the pods appear where you can actually see them. Harvest the pods when they are young and tender, because letting them get oversized can slow the plant down and make the harvest less enjoyable. In July, okra earns its place because it does not feel like you are forcing a spring vegetable to survive summer. It feels like you finally planted something that understands the season. If you are planting okra late or replacing a failed crop, try to give the plant the warmest, sunniest spot you can manage while still keeping the pot from drying into dust. A simple trick is to group the okra pot near other large containers so the sides of the pot are not exposed to heat from every direction. You are not trying to shade the leaves all day. You are trying to keep the root zone from becoming the hottest part of the garden. That small difference can turn a struggling container into a steady summer plant. The second vegetable is peppers. Peppers are one of the best container crops for July because they do not need a huge garden bed to look productive. A healthy pepper plant in a pot can add color, shape, and real food to a patio. Sweet peppers, hot peppers, lunchbox peppers, and many compact varieties can all work well when the container is large enough and the moisture is steady. The mistake many gardeners make with peppers is thinking heat alone is enough. Peppers like warmth, but they do not like wild swings between bone dry and soaked. If the pot dries out completely, the plant can drop flowers, pause growth, or produce stressed fruit. If the pot stays too wet, the roots can struggle. The goal is even moisture, strong light, and enough nutrients to support fruiting without pushing only soft, leafy growth. Peppers are especially good for people who want a container garden that looks beautiful on camera or from the kitchen window. Green fruit slowly turning yellow, orange, red, purple, or chocolate can make a small space feel abundant. And because peppers are usually more compact than many tomato plants, they fit well into patios and decks. If July heat has made your cool season greens look tired, a pepper plant can remind you that some crops are just getting started. For peppers, patience matters. A plant may spend time building roots and leaves before it gives you the color you want. Do not keep changing the pot, moving it around every day, or overfeeding it because you are impatient. Give it a stable home, remove any badly damaged leaves, and let the plant settle into a steady rhythm. In a container garden, consistency is often more powerful than doing something new every morning. The third vegetable is eggplant. Eggplant is another warm season crop that can look dramatic in a container if you give it enough room. The leaves are large, the flowers are attractive, and the fruit can be glossy, colorful, and easy to spot. For many gardeners, eggplant feels like a garden bed crop, but compact varieties can do very well in pots. The main thing eggplant wants is a container that does not punish its roots. A small pot can dry too fast and make the plant struggle before it ever becomes productive. Choose a generous container, keep the moisture consistent, and place it where it receives strong sun. If your area has extremely harsh afternoon heat, you may need to watch for wilting, but do not confuse normal midday drooping with total failure. Many plants perk back up when the evening cools and the roots have moisture. Eggplant also benefits from regular feeding, especially in a container where nutrients wash through more quickly than they do in the ground. But again, do not overdo nitrogen. If a plant makes huge leaves and very little fruit, the balance may be off. Eggplant belongs in this list because it loves the warm part of the growing season, and in the right pot, it can give your July garden a strong tropical-looking presence. Another reason eggplant is useful in a video like this is that it teaches the difference between heat tolerance and container stress. The plant can love summer, but if it is in a tiny pot exposed to wind and allowed to dry out repeatedly, it may still look miserable. When a warm season vegetable fails, do not immediately blame the plant. Look at the container. Look at the root room. Look at the watering pattern. July rewards crops that like heat, but it rewards gardeners who understand pots even more. Now, if you want more food without taking up more floor space, the next vegetables matter because they grow upward. Yardlong beans are a perfect example. They can climb, they can handle heat, and they can turn a container with a simple trellis into a vertical harvest. This is exactly the kind of crop that makes sense when your balcony or patio has limited square footage. Yard-long beans are not the same as the cool weather crops that collapse when summer gets serious. They are built for warmth. In a pot, they need a sturdy support because the plant wants to climb. A teepee, a small trellis, a railing setup, or strong strings can all work if they are secure. The container should be large enough to hold steady moisture because a climbing plant with a lot of leaves can drink more than you expect in July. The best part is that yard-long beans make your garden feel productive in a different direction. Instead of spreading across the floor, they rise. You get shade, movement, flowers, and long pods that are fun to harvest. Pick the pods while they are still tender for the best eating quality. If you let too many mature fully on the vine, the plant may slow down. For small space gardeners, yard-long beans show that July growth does not have to be wide. It can be tall. This is also a good place to think about airflow. A wall of vines can be beautiful, but if the leaves are pressed flat against a wall with no movement, pests and disease can become harder to manage. Give the trellis a little breathing room if you can. Train the vines gently, check the leaves when you water, and harvest often enough that you are paying attention. The best container gardens are not ignored. They are visited, touched, watered, picked, and adjusted a little at a time. The fifth vegetable is cowpeas. Cowpeas are often overlooked by people who only think about green beans, but they are one of the most useful hot weather crops for summer gardens. They are known for handling heat better than many common vegetables, and they can do well in places where July feels too intense for tender spring crops. In containers, cowpeas still need the basics. Give them enough soil volume, good drainage, and consistent water while they establish. Once they are growing strongly, they can feel much more forgiving than many delicate vegetables. Depending on the type, you may grow them for pods, fresh peas, or dry peas, but for a container garden, the important point is that they fit the summer season instead of fighting it. Cowpeas also help change the mood of a July garden. When other plants look like they're waiting for cooler weather, cowpeas often look like they understand the heat. They can give you foliage, flowers, and pods in a season when many gardeners are wondering what can still be planted. If you want a crop that feels practical and summer-ready, cowpeas deserve a place on your list. They are especially helpful for gardeners who feel discouraged by fussy crops. Cowpeas do not need to be treated like delicate decorations. They still need care, but they bring a more rugged summer energy into the garden. If you have been watching lettuce fade, peas disappear, or spring greens lose flavor, cowpeas can reset your expectations. Instead of asking, what can barely survive this heat, you start asking, what was waiting for this heat? Before we move into leafy crops, do not overlook herbs. In July, a small herb pot can sometimes give you the fastest feeling of success. The sixth plant is basil, and basil is one of the easiest ways to make a hot container garden feel useful again. It loves warm weather, it smells amazing when you brush the leaves, and it rewards you when you harvest it correctly. The secret with basil is not just planting it, the secret is pinching and harvesting before it becomes tall, woody, and flower heavy. When you pinch the top growth, the plant is encouraged to branch. Instead of one tired stem, you can get a fuller, bushier plant. In a pot, that matters because you want every inch of space to produce something you can actually use. Basil does need moisture. A small pot can dry out quickly in July, and stressed basil may flower faster. Once it flowers heavily, the flavor and growth can change, so keep it watered, give it sun, and harvest often. If you cook at home, basil is one of those crops that makes even a small container garden feel valuable. A few fresh leaves can change a meal, and the plant can keep growing as long as you keep it healthy and do not let it dry into a crispy little shrub. A good way to use basil in a July garden is to plant it close to where you will actually see it. Put it near the kitchen door, on a sunny step, or beside other plants you check every morning. Basil rewards frequent attention. If you ignore it for weeks and only notice it when it flowers, you miss the best part. But if you pinch a little here, water deeply there, and keep the plant from becoming stressed, basil turns one container into a daily reminder that small harvests still count. The seventh plant is mint. Mint is almost too good at growing, which is why it belongs in a pot. In the ground, mint can spread aggressively and take over more space than you intended. In a container, that same energy becomes useful because you can control it. If you want something green, fragrant, and forgiving during summer, mint is hard to ignore. But here is the rule with mint. Do not casually tuck it into the same pot with a weaker plant and hope everyone gets along. Mint can outcompete neighbors, especially in a container where roots are sharing limited space. Give mint its own pot. Let it become a full, leafy, useful plant without bullying your peppers, basil, or greens. Mint can handle warm weather, but it appreciates moisture. If it wilts badly every afternoon, the pot may be too small, too exposed, or drying too fast. Move it where it gets some relief from the harshest afternoon sun if needed, and keep the soil from becoming dust dry. Mint earns its place because it gives you repeated harvests, fresh flavor, and a sense of success, even if you only have one small corner left. Mint also teaches a useful container lesson. Sometimes the best pot is not the biggest or the fanciest. Sometimes the best pot is the one that keeps a strong plant contained. When a plant has a spreading habit, a container is not a limitation, it is a boundary. That is why mint can be frustrating in the ground but wonderful in a pot. You take its natural energy and give it edges. And here is where many summer gardeners make the biggest mistake. They keep trying to grow cool season leaves when there are better leafy crops for heat. The eighth vegetable is Malabar spinach. The name can be confusing because Malabar spinach is not the same as the spinach many people plant in spring. It is a warm season leafy vine, and that is exactly why it can be so useful in July. When regular spinach bolts or disappears in heat, Malabar spinach can keep climbing. The leaves are thick and glossy, and the plant has a completely different personality from delicate spring greens. In a container, give it a trellis or something to climb because it wants to grow upward. Like other leafy crops, it still needs water, especially in a pot, but it is far better matched to hot weather than true spinach. Malabar spinach is also a great retention plant for a video like this because many gardeners have heard the name but do not really understand how to use it. You can harvest leaves and tender shoots, and the plant can make a container look lush instead of tired. If your July garden has been missing greens, this is one of the first plants to consider, not because it tastes exactly like spinach, but because it solves the summer spinach problem in a much more heat-friendly way. The mistake is expecting it to behave like a small spring salad green. It is a vine, so let it be a vine. Give it a place to climb, harvest the tender parts, and use it as a summer green rather than a copy of something from April. That mindset matters across the whole July garden. Do not look for exact replacements, look for seasonal replacements. The goal is not to recreate spring. The goal is to eat well in summer. The ninth vegetable is amaranth greens. If you want leafy growth in hot weather, amaranth can be a much better choice than forcing lettuce to behave in July. Amaranth greens are grown in many warm regions, and they can bring color, height, and edible leaves into a summer container garden. In pots, amaranth needs enough room to grow and enough moisture to keep the leaves tender. Like many greens, the younger leaves are usually the most useful for regular harvests. If the plant becomes too mature, the texture can change, so do not wait forever before you start cutting. Harvesting early and often can help you use the plant while it is at its best. Amaranth also adds visual interest. Depending on the variety, you may see green leaves, red tones, or beautiful stems that make the pot look ornamental even though it is edible. This is a good example of a crop that gives you both beauty and food. In July, when many classic salad greens are unhappy, amaranth greens can help you keep leafy harvests in the garden without pretending it is still spring. It is also a useful crop for gardeners who want their containers to look full quickly. A pot of thin, pale, struggling lettuce can make a garden feel defeated. A pot of warm season greens with strong color can make the same space feel intentional. That visual difference matters because gardeners are more likely to care for a garden that looks alive. When your pots look promising, you visit them more often. When you visit more often, you catch problems sooner. The 10th vegetable is Swiss chard. Swiss chard is not as heat-loving as okra or cowpeas, but it can be surprisingly useful in containers because it tolerates a wider range of conditions than many tender greens. In many gardens, chard keeps producing when lettuce has already given up, and visually it is one of the most attractive vegetables you can grow in a pot. The colorful stems make a container look alive. Red, yellow, orange, pink, and white stems can turn a small patio into something that looks designed rather than accidental. You can harvest the outer leaves and let the center keep growing, which makes chard useful for repeated picking. That cut and come again rhythm is exactly what many container gardeners need. The important thing is to keep chard from getting too stressed. Heat plus a dry pot can make any leafy plant struggle. Give it consistent moisture, consider a little afternoon relief in very hot climates, and keep harvesting before the leaves become huge and tired. Swiss chard belongs in this list because it gives you color, leaves, and resilience in one container. It may not be the wildest grower in extreme heat, but it is one of the most useful bridge crops between leafy greens and summer toughness. Chard is also helpful because it gives you a harvesting pattern that beginners can understand. You do not have to pull the whole plant. You do not have to wait for a single dramatic moment. You can take a few outside leaves, leave the center, and come back later. That kind of harvest makes a container garden feel generous. It teaches patience and rhythm, which are two things July gardens need. Now, let's come back to the crops many people imagine when they think of a container garden. The 11th vegetable is cherry tomatoes. A pot full of cherry tomatoes is one of the most satisfying sights in home gardening. The clusters are bright, the harvest feels frequent, and the plant makes a patio feel like a real food garden. But cherry tomatoes in July need respect. They are not tiny plants just because the fruit is tiny. Many cherry tomato plants can become large and thirsty. If you put one in a small pot and expect it to behave politely, it may punish you with wilting, blossom drop, or inconsistent fruit. Choose a large container, add a cage or stake early, and keep watering steady. In hot areas, uneven moisture can lead to stress, cracking, or poor performance. Cherry tomatoes also need airflow. Do not cram them so tightly into a corner that the leaves stay crowded and humid. A healthy tomato plant should have support, space, sun, and regular attention. If you can give that, cherry tomatoes can be one of the most rewarding July container vegetables. They bring color, flavor, and that exciting feeling of checking the plant every day to see what has ripened. If you are starting in July, consider your local season length and whether you are planting a transplant or starting from seed. In some regions, a healthy transplant may make more sense than seed if you want fruit before the season changes. In warmer areas with a long growing season, you may have more flexibility. This is why good gardening advice always comes with context. The plant may be right, but timing, variety, and your local climate still matter. The 12th vegetable is mini cucumbers. Full-size cucumber vines can take over a space quickly, but compact or mini cucumber types can be much more manageable in containers. They are especially good if you can give them a small trellis and keep the moisture steady. Few things feel more refreshing in summer than picking a cucumber from a pot right outside your door. Cucumbers, however, are thirsty. In July heat, a cucumber in a pot can go from happy to wilted faster than you expect. The plant has large leaves, fast growth, and a lot of water moving through it. A container that is too small will make the whole plant more dramatic. It may wilt, drop flowers, or produce bitter fruit if stress becomes too high. To make mini cucumbers work, use a generous pot, add support, mulch the surface, and water deeply. Try not to let the plant swing from dry to flooded and back again. Harvest cucumbers when they are still the right size for the variety. Letting oversized fruit hang on the vine can tell the plant to slow down. Mini cucumbers belong in a July pot because they turn vertical space, water, and warmth into a crisp summer harvest. They also teach you to observe quickly. Cucumbers can change fast. A small fruit can become oversized before you realize it, and a dry afternoon can show up in the plant almost immediately. That sounds demanding, but it can be a benefit. When a cucumber plant is near your door, it encourages you to check the garden every day. And in July, daily checking is one of the best habits you can build. The 13th vegetable is bush beans. Bush beans are a great option for gardeners who want beans without building a tall trellis. They grow more compactly than pole beans, and that makes them useful for containers. If you are new to gardening, bush beans can feel straightforward. Plant them in a pot, give them sun, keep the moisture even, and watch for flowers and pods. In July, bush beans can work well in many areas, but timing and local heat matter. In extremely hot regions, they may slow down during the most brutal stretch, so use your climate as a guide. But for many container gardeners, especially where there is enough water and not every afternoon is extreme, bush beans can give a good harvest from a modest amount of space. The container should be wide enough for several plants without turning into a crowded mess. Good airflow matters. Pick beans while they are tender because regular harvesting encourages the plant to keep producing. Bush beans are not flashy like peppers or cherry tomatoes, but they are practical, familiar, and very useful. They give you that satisfying feeling of walking outside and finding dinner growing in a pot. Bush beans are also a nice confidence crop because the plant tells a clear story. First you see leaves, then flowers, then small pods, then a harvest you can hold in your hand. That visible progress helps keep new gardeners engaged. If a video viewer has been discouraged by crops that took too long or never produced, beans can make gardening feel understandable again. The 14th vegetable is green onions. If you only have one small container left, green onions may still earn a place in your July garden. They do not need the same kind of large pot that a tomato, cucumber, or eggplant needs. They can grow in a narrower space, they can be tucked near a kitchen door, and they give you a harvest that is easy to use. Green onions are especially good for beginners because they are not dramatic. You can grow them from seeds, start sets, or even regrow some from kitchen scraps, depending on what you have. The harvest is simple. You can cut the green tops and let them regrow if the plant is healthy, or pull whole onions when they are ready. In a container, they still need moisture, but they are much easier to fit into a small space than many fruiting crops. Green onions also make the garden feel useful every week. You may not get a giant basket of food from one tiny pot, and you should not pretend you will. But a handful of fresh green onion tops can finish soups, eggs, rice, salads, tacos, potatoes, and summer dishes. In a July container garden, usefulness matters. Green onions prove that not every productive pot has to be large or dramatic. They are also perfect for filling gaps. If one corner of a long planter is empty, green onions can use that space. If you have a shallow container that cannot support a pepper or tomato, green onions may still work. If you want something near the kitchen that makes cooking feel connected to the garden, they are easy to appreciate. Sometimes the most valuable container is not the one that produces the biggest harvest, it is the one you actually use. The 15th vegetable is sweet potato leaves. Stay with this one because it may change the way you look at a crop. Many gardeners only grow for the roots. Sweet potatoes are famous for their tubers, but the leaves and tender vine tips are also edible when prepared properly. In hot weather, sweet potato vines can grow with impressive energy, and in a container, they can spill, trail, and cover space quickly. This does not mean every sweet potato container will give you a huge root harvest, especially if the pot is small or the season is short. Do not grow it with unrealistic expectations. But if your goal is leafy growth in summer, sweet potato leaves can be a valuable option. They like warmth, and once established, the vines can make a tired corner look green again. Give sweet potatoes a decent container, loose potting mix, sun, and steady water. If you are growing for leaves, harvest lightly and regularly so the plant can keep growing. Do not strip the plant bare. Take tender tips and younger leaves and leave enough growth to feed the plant. This is one of the best examples of thinking differently in July. Instead of asking why your spring greens are failing, you ask what summer plants are already trying to give you. Sweet potato vines can also soften the look of a container garden. They spill over edges, cover bare soil, and make a hot patio feel greener. That matters because summer gardens can look harsh if every pot is just dry soil and stressed stems. A trailing edible vine brings movement and fullness. It reminds you that the garden does not have to look like spring to be beautiful. There is also a simple way to build your own July container mix. Choose one plant that gives height, one plant that gives fruit, one plant that gives leaves, and one plant that gives flavor. For height, think yardlong beans, Malabar spinach, or mini cucumbers. For fruit, think peppers, eggplant, cherry tomatoes, or okra. For leaves, think amaranth, chard, sweet potato leaves, or Malabar spinach again. For flavor, think basil, mint, and green onions. With that mix, even a small space has layers. It has something climbing, something coloring up, something you can cut for greens, and something you can use in the kitchen almost every day. Do not be afraid to keep it simple. A beginner does not need 15 pots on day one. 3 good pots are better than 15 neglected ones. A deep pot of okra, a separate pot of basil, and a container of green onions can teach you more than a crowded patio full of thirsty plants you cannot keep watered. Once those are working, you can add a trellis crop, then maybe a pepper, then maybe a leafy summer green. A productive garden is built by repeating what works, not by forcing everything at once. After all, 15 vegetables, the real question is not which one is best. The real question is which one fits the pot, sunlight, and space you actually have. If you only have a few small containers, start with basil, green onions, mint in its own pot, or bush beans in a wider container. If you have deeper pots or grow bags, think about okra, peppers, eggplant, cherry tomatoes, or sweet potatoes. If you have a railing, trellis, or vertical support, consider yardlong beans, Malabar spinach, or mini cucumbers. If what you miss most in July is leafy harvests, focus on Malabar spinach, amaranth greens, Swiss chard, and sweet potato leaves. Also remember that containers are movable, and that is one of their biggest advantages. If a plant is frying against a wall, you may be able to move it a few feet. If a pot is drying too quickly on bare concrete, you can raise it slightly, group it with other containers, or place it where it gets morning sun instead of the harshest afternoon blast. A garden bed is fixed, but a pot gives you options. In July, those small adjustments can matter as much as the plant list itself. Mulch matters too. A thin layer of straw, shredded leaves, fine bark, or another suitable mulch can reduce how quickly the surface dries. It will not solve every problem, and you still need to water properly, but it can make a hot container more stable. The goal is not to keep the soil wet all the time. The goal is to avoid the harsh cycle where roots go from soaked to bone dry again and again. Most vegetables on this list will perform better when the root zone is steady. And if you are filming or building a garden that looks good, mix textures, put upright plants like okra and peppers near trailing plants like sweet potato vines, put colorful crops like Swiss chard and peppers where they can be seen. Put herbs near the front where you can touch and harvest them. Put climbing crops toward the back or along a railing. A container garden is not just a collection of pots. It is a small food system, and when the layout makes sense, the whole garden becomes easier to care for. This is how you make a July container garden work. You stop treating every vegetable like it belongs in every season. You stop expecting lettuce to love the same conditions as okra. You stop putting thirsty fruiting plants into tiny pots and wondering why they suffer. And you start matching the plant to the season, the container, and your real-life watering habits. A hot patio is not a perfect place for every crop, but it can be a great place for the right crop. A balcony may not have room for a traditional garden, but it may have room for a pepper, a basil pot, a trellised bean, and a container of green onions. A backyard corner may look too small to matter, but with the right mix of vertical growth, leafy harvests, herbs, and compact fruiting plants, it can become one of the most useful parts of your summer. One last practical detail. When you choose a plant, choose the pot first. Many container failures begin with a beautiful seedling and a container that cannot support it. Herbs and green onions can be forgiving in smaller spaces, but tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplant, okra, and sweet potatoes ask for more. If the plant is meant to produce fruit or long vines, assume it needs more root room, more water storage, and more support. If the plant is meant to be harvested as leaves or herbs, you can often work with a smaller space, but you still need to keep it from drying out too quickly. This is why the best July gardeners are flexible. They do not say, I only grow this one crop every year. They look at the weather, the space, the containers, and the time they really have for watering. Then they choose plants that fit. That flexibility is what keeps a small garden productive when the season gets difficult. The most important lesson is simple. July is not the end of the container garden. July is the moment when the garden asks you to change strategy. Cool season crops may slow down, bolt, or turn bitter, but heat-loving vegetables are ready for the stage. They still need care, they still need water, they still need enough root space. But they are not fighting the season in the same way. So before you give up on your summer pots, look at them again. Maybe one pot needs okra instead of another round of lettuce. Maybe the railing needs yardlong beans. Maybe the shady edge needs mint in its own container. Maybe the sunny corner needs peppers, eggplant, or cherry tomatoes. Maybe the greens you have been missing are not spinach at all, but Malabar spinach, amaranth, chard, or sweet potato leaves. A productive July container garden is not about fighting summer. It is about choosing vegetables that know how to grow with it. Start with the pots you already have. Choose one plant for leaves, one for fruit, one for herbs, and one that climbs. Keep the soil evenly moist, protect the roots from drying out too fast, harvest before the plants get tired, and let the warm season vegetables do what they were built to do. When you match the right plant to the right pot in the right season, July heat stops looking like the end of the garden. It starts looking like the reason the garden comes alive.